Dad always used to say the only causes worth fighting for were the lost causes.
The Senator yields. No, sir, I will not yield.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
You're listening to a Pyrolitical Pyrocast.
Welcome to the Pyrocast presented by Pyrolitical Radio Show. Hey, everybody out there, I'm Thomas.
And I'm Randall.
We got some great topics for you tonight, as usual. Randall, give us a rundown.
Well, we got a good cornucopia, so to speak, of topics to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about net neutrality. We're going to talk a little bit about capitalism and pain, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, capitalism does cause a lot of pain for socialists, so I can't wait to talk about it. Now, before we get into this, we just want to invite you to go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. That's Pyrolitical Live. We'd love to have you subscribe so you can get notifications of all of the videos we post there. So, Randall, we've got capitalism on the docket, net neutrality. There's a lot going on. Chelsea Manning. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, and that's headlines. So I think a good place to start would be probably talking about net neutrality. That seems to be a favorite topic of yours.
It is. We've talked about this several times on different shows, but I saw something as we were preparing where the guy I can't remember his name right now. The guy who's currently for Trump, the FCC chairperson or head of the FCC. Anyway, where he's had a whole bunch of protesters that have basically attacked his home. They've stormed his home and tried to, because of net neutrality, because he's trying to roll back these decisions regarding it. And there's lots of, maybe not lots, but there's several groups or shows or news agencies that are talking about this so-called rollback of net neutrality rules and how bad that is. And probably the biggest one is now I can't think of his name. But Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and after his show, they reported that they were receiving thousands of fake applications through their forum to try and protest what was going on. But I think it's important for people to step back a little bit. Here it's easy. I mean, I did it myself when I first heard about net neutrality. I was like, yeah, totally. The government should be involved in helping to protect individuals so you don't have Fox or not Fox, but Comcast or Cox Cable or Roadrunner Internet or whoever, these big internet companies, Verizon being the main one that what's his name, John Oliver talked about in his episode about it, that they wouldn't get out there and say, okay, well, we're starting, like we partnered with, say, Hulu, and so we're going to block Netflix or slow down their traffic so that people just use our partnered or our own solution. And it's like, well, we don't want that. You want to be able to have freedom on the internet. There's a great history of that going on in with the internet since its inception. We have very little regulation, if any, and so we want to keep that. And the government has been trying to get its gloms all over the internet for years and years and years. They want to have the internet tax. They want to have whatever, and for the most part, the internet's been able to evade a lot of those. And then comes net neutrality. Okay. The canary in the mine shaft seems to be these arguments about how the government is going to protect us against these huge corporations that are going to stop your access to different areas. And they have proposed things like that, that they want to be able to have preferred lanes or whatever for their traffic. And they're capitalist, businesses. Obviously, they want profits. So if they can leverage their control to equal more profits, they're probably going to go down that lane or down that avenue.
But they won't if the government regulates it. Then they will get lobbyists, and they will try to get a good deal for their business, not their competitors. So that often happens when the government gets involved. It's who has the most money for lobbyists, and then they tend to get things in their favor.
Yeah, well, and so part of the reason why they couldn't do any rules like that before was that the internet wasn't, it wasn't governed by the same telecommunications rules that, say, telephone and cable providers were.
Right.
It was under Title I instead of Title III or Title II. And so what really changed when the last rule change happened to kind of set net neutrality forward was to change their classification from a Title I entity to a Title II entity so they could be regulated. Okay.
Yep.
So to the average consumer, they think, wow, this is great. I got all excited about net neutrality. I submitted something, and all of a sudden the government did something about it to protect my rights. They're going to block, stop these companies from being able to make me pay more to get access there, or for giving preferential treatment to certain sites over others. And that sounds great. But that's exactly what happened with the income tax and what happened with the 17th Amendment, giving up your right to vote, really, by getting an opportunity to vote for senators. Well, that's another show right there. But anyway, the people get all excited about this, and they give away their liberties. So basically, this was creating a scenario where previously the government had little to no control over these Title I entities, but switching them to Title II gave them the ability to regulate so they could prevent the things, the fears that net neutrality is supposed to prevent.
Exactly what they do with drugs, with marijuana. They keep it at a Type 1 classification, therefore it's illegal.
Right.
And so this is the exact same thing with this.
It's the exact same thing. And for those that are listening to this and being like, well, wait a second, I'm worried about what Comcast or Verizon is going to do to my traffic. The market is an amazing arbiter, okay? You may have your line with, your internet line with one of these big conglomerates, and you're worried about it. And you know what? Without the net neutrality rules, they may try and implement something like it. Verizon may come down and they say, you know what, we're going to just have our own video service. We're going to ignore all the others, and as long as you're using our video service, it'll work. If you try and use something else, it's not going to work. How long do you think that Verizon's going to last in that mode?
Yeah, that you see why that's not the case now, because they stand to lose a lot of money, or a competitor will offer the service they've decided not to offer. When I turn on my TV, I've got Hulu sitting there, I've got Netflix sitting there, I've got all kinds of different service providers, and I use most of them. And so, yeah, they're foolish to block that. But then again, there may be a capitalistic reason to do that.
Yeah,
just depends.
But that's the point, is they may try, and it may be uncomfortable for a little while, but it's only a matter of time. When I was first kind of mulling about this, I have servers co-located, and I talked with the guy that I was getting my service from, because they have a local ISP as well as server hosting or rack space. And so I asked him, what do you think about this? And he's like, it's a complete joke. As an ISP, he's saying, because the thing is, as far as the market goes, under their current classification, because there's very little regulation, there's nothing to stop, Joe Blow in your big skyrise building from pulling in a fast internet line from a competing internet provider or a wholesale provider, and then sharing wireless access through your whole building. And all of a sudden Verizon goes away. It's not a problem because he's offering a service and he's making more money, and you're probably getting a better rate. So it's like the market. This is painful, right? We're going to talk about pain in a little bit, but this pain in the marketplace provides for additional growth and opportunity that we wouldn't have otherwise. And so if you want to run to government in order to solve your or assuage your fears, because it's nothing yet, it's all fear. There's no actual issues that are active at this point in time. It's all fear.
Who's complaining about their internet service? I mean, you generally get what you pay for. You can pay for higher speed. I wanted to weigh in, Randall. You talked about the FCC. I wanted to share something that happened, I think, just yesterday. One of the FCC commissioners, Mignon, I think's her name, Clyburn, she urged the public to continue voicing their support for a free and open internet. We already have that. So for me, net neutrality has been a master example or exercise in deceptive marketing.
Right.
Because even this TechCrunch article, it says the commissioner said that over 1 million people have reached out offering opinions on how the FCC should act. And she said that researchers have suggested that 96% of those who have weighed in have done so in favor of an open internet. And so even the language that these media outlets are using is that it is fair and open when we already have that. But if you tell the people enough times, then they start to think the opposite. In fact, she said net neutrality is doomed if we're silent. And so to me, I feel like this is just a slap in the face, but they manipulate the American public by these types of terms. So regardless of what's happening, it's just they manipulate through the specific use of phrases. Who doesn't want a fair and open internet? I do. You do. I mean, people don't realize Randall runs a hosting company and sets up server clusters for, big companies. And so he's intimately involved with this issue. And so for these lead bureaucrats in the FCC to come out and say, hey, we want a free and open internet to a huge conference of techies at TechCrunch in New York City, it's just, you almost feel like you can't win because those people are representing the levers of power, which can set in the legislation, which truly turns the internet from not too free and open, but more expensive and more complicated and more closed. And they're lying to the people. Right. And they know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing. And the only way you can buy into this, these net neutrality falsehoods, is if you assume that government is on the whole benign, and without fault. It's not culpable. It would not take sides. It doesn't play favorites. Well, that's a bunch of bull, and we all know it. Every day we talk, what's the big thing right now? Everybody's talking about how they're worried that Donald Trump is playing favorites with Russia and his relationships and how that could be a conflict of interest. It's all about relationships. That's why lobbyists are there. They're all about trying to win favor with the halls of Congress and with the president to try and get their agenda passed. And whenever you take an industry or an industry and take it and try and regulate it, what you do is not protect the people. You entrench the companies that are there as they build themselves a lobbying department, with lots and lots of money to go in and carve them out a special seat.
What you get?
Congress.
High fructose corn syrup and ethanol.
Both of them.
That's
yes.
what you get.
Yes. Well, but that's the thing is you get the exact opposite of a free and open internet. Okay. If you think that all these things out there that are totally unregulated or unregulated, you're wrong. The internet is the closest thing you get to it because we have been able to, keep the congressman's hands off of the government or off of the internet. We want to keep the government out of it. And you don't get the government's hands out of internet by asking them to regulate it. That is that's letting the wolf into the den.
Well, look at the title of this article. Even the name, net neutrality. FCC commissioner, net neutrality is doomed if we're silent. Hey, the government is never a neutral party.
No.
They are always interested, whether it's the political parties or it's the companies that are with lobbyists or, connections.
Who has more money? Who has more money? Comcast and Verizon, or an internet startup. Because as soon as you start to regulate the internet, the companies with the most money that can buy influence are going to be the ones that help establish future rules, right? If the FCC can make this change right now, then what's to stop them, from in the future from changing what we see as net neutrality to be net duality or duplicity or whatever the heck we want to call it at a future date? It'll just change. And overnight, people are going to say, I don't know, there was a day when I used to be able to just connect to my internet and it worked. But now all I can get is crap because the government's involved. Hello, can you imagine what an awful internet provider government would be just in general? Yeah. I mean, we have some examples. Here in Utah.
They offer good cheese. They make good
government cheese.
No, and I want to throw this in too, real quick. Back in February, the FCC chairman, Ajit Pai, he pledged to roll back net neutrality regulations during European address. And now 3 months later, one of his commissioners is saying, no, we want to move forward. So government can't even figure out what it wants.
Well,
go ahead.
Ajit Pai, he is the chairman, and he's the one who's trying to roll it back.
Yeah,
and so that's why he's getting so much backlash from all of John Oliver's cronies.
His commissioners didn't get the memo, I guess.
Well, they don't all agree. He was not in favor of it when they put it through in the first place. So now that he's the commission chairperson.
He used to represent some of these big providers.
Right. And so obviously because he represented the big providers, he's still representing them now. Now, the point is, people, don't get emotional about net neutrality, because the more emotional you get, the worse decisions you're going to make. And like I said, when this first started to hit the scene and YouTube videos and whatever were coming out about it, I was right in that same camp. I was thinking, yeah, let's do this. We don't want this nasty thing to happen. But think about it from a principled standpoint, and you realize, wait a second, this is a bunch of bullcrap. This is all malarkey. It is just, well,
it's tyranny.
It is tyranny at
I'm
work.
Taking it to that level, Randall, up to the top.
Boom.
And let me tell you 4 words. Do not believe these words if government says neutral, investment, free, and open. Those are complete lies, because government can't provide any of those things. Go ahead, Randall.
Okay, well, I just wanted to
4 words.
I just wanted to say that, we talk about all these things, and people are worried about those because they're worried about monopolies. And we've talked about before on this show what it takes to have a monopoly. Okay?
Yep.
We don't really tend to understand what a monopoly is here in the United States. We like to think we do. But a monopoly cannot occur unless the government is involved. Okay? The government has the gun. It has force. And a company, try as they will, even if they control, Standard Oil controlled a tremendous amount, almost
like 95%,
like 90+% of the oil distribution in the United States, and still they were not a monopoly. They tried really hard, but I don't know exactly how much involvement they had with government, but if they didn't, I'd still say they weren't a monopoly, because someone else could try and work against them. Someone else could do it, and as long as the government's not involved, there's very little that the company can do, legally, to try and completely thwart someone. They can try and fight them. And that's fine. But ultimately, there's still choice at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, here, speaking of choice, Randall, and you will agree with this, that locally we have, I don't even know how many ISPs we have. I think we have 7 or 8, at least that many choices, from little ones to the bigger ones like CenturyLink.
Just in southern Utah, and there are some of them. Some of them are just little dinky, wireless outlets, and they're just like, they put up their own repeater, they buy a fat internet pipe, and they share it out. And you know what?
And
it works because
most of the time,
because of the lack of regulation from the government, they have the ability to do that, and they don't have the same burden to entry. the big ISPs ultimately would love to see regulation enter. In some regards, I'm sure
just
in some
like
regards,
the insurance companies with Obamacare.
Yeah,
you didn't hear them squeaking too much.
No,
they have made their profits. I heard the other day, and it's escaping me. Their profits have increased by 10 to 20%, I believe I heard on the radio, since Obamacare went into effect. I'll get that number, but they had huge profits due to Obamacare. No wonder they were. But in Utah, private insurance, there's only one provider.
Right.
Through your employer. Select Health's the only place to get it, and because of these exchanges, they're looking at possibly pulling out. So this is what you're going to get with the internet industry. I mean, right now, though, there's lots of options. I believe in the last 5 years, I have had 5 or 6 different ISPs. I think you would see that go away. The small ones would probably die.
Yeah, well, I mean, this initial step wouldn't necessarily drive anyone out, but it's the foothold, right? It's the getting starting to turn the water up with the frog in the pot. It's something that makes it just a little more difficult to do business, and then eventually makes it easier for government to add more regulation and more regulation. Don't buy it. Don't buy it, people. Don't fall for it.
Well, you know what you'll see? This is what the bigger companies do. They buy up all the little ISPs because they can't stay profitable. The bigger ones can be profitable, though, because they have the infrastructure and they're adding to their customer base, and they have a lot lower costs overall per customer. So what you'll see the big boys buy up the small ones, and then you'll have less choices. It'll be crappier. I mean, I used to sell internet services. Comcast was a nightmare. Time Warner, nightmare. Everybody hated them. But then they had Verizon, AT&T in a lot of areas. And then there were all these regional carriers that they had those options as well, which we'd hook them up with. So that's what happens in these situations. The big ones will eat up the small ones, which have some economic advantage. So now, Randall, I did find that there were some protests on the FCC's vote to overturn net neutrality. And I see people with signs that say, keep the internet free. I didn't know the internet was free, except maybe at the library, but then you're still paying for it through taxes. Have a heart. Keep the internet free. So anyway, it's just such a bad marketing campaign. I mean, it's so effective that it really torques me off. Just the title, net neutrality. I mean, why don't they call it something else, Randall? What would be a good title for this? Net... huge sucking sound. But that's
the thing. They don't want a negative connotation. They want people to think it's something great and grand. And those that are proposing it and have been pushing it, they are, they think this is a great idea.
They do.
But it's like, it's what is seen, but what is not seen is that you're going to lose everything you're fighting for ultimately, because the government's the only one that can really take it away.
Well, and this FCC commissioner says, our researchers have shown, she didn't say I saw it, our researchers have shown of the million people that have weighed in, 96% are in favor of it. It's like, okay, government, we're supposed to believe you, but I got it, Randall. We'll call this hashtag net brutality. There you go.
There you go.
That rolls off the top.
Anyway, so I guess what I want people to go away with is just realizing, you know what? The market works. And the market doesn't stop working just because Verizon or Comcast decides to play favorites with their own thing. Let them do it. I mean, it's their infrastructure. You're renting their infrastructure. Fine. But if you don't like it, go somewhere else and make Verizon hurt. That's your choice in the marketplace. That's what makes the market work.
Well, you can do that with phone carriers. And I say this, Randall, in praise of you, those who listen to this, trust a guy who's been in internet service providing for a decade or more and hosts websites and sets up servers for companies. He knows more than the FCC commissioner who's paid by the company that wants to choke Randall's business. You just have to see that people in the internet industry know what they're talking about. And I'd love to see researchers tell us where the ISPs really stand on this. I'm sorry, the smaller ones. They'd all be up in arms over this. So this is just another evidence of an industry, yet another one, being regulated into more towards monopoly, like truly monopoly.
So don't let it happen. Don't let it continue. Submit whatever. Tell people that you're excited about them rolling it back, because it actually is a really good thing.
I just think free and open, it's a complete lie. And stop monopolies by government. It's a complete lie.
Right.
The Sherman Antitrust Act opened up Pandora's box, and it's never gone back in 100 years. Randall, I think you nailed that topic, and I added some levity to it.
You did good.
Trust Randall.
Don't trust me. Just think about it. Figure it out for yourself. It's all there.
Trust that the government's lying to you when they use a marketing campaign. Please trust that. Just go off the evidence. Well, that's we're almost at the bottom of the hour, man. Net neutrality.
Wow.
I didn't think that would be interesting. That was actually really fun. So thank you for that. All right. Well, we had other topics we wanted to discuss. You were going to talk about, or you said we might talk about capitalism. Is that a good place to go now? Or
well, I think it is. I mean, we just kind of been down that route, talking about how capitalism is, a good thing. Tell us about capitalism, Thomas. I'm going to pull up that video that we had yesterday and play it for our viewers.
Oh, yeah?
So what do we got for why is capitalism a good thing? Let's
say this. Capitalism is one of the most debated topics. In fact, Randall, you did a video. Well, we did a video, but you were on it talking about Keynesian economics 9 years ago in a local
Was it
library.
9 years ago? That's crazy.
I know, 2008. But you were talking about Keynesian economics versus Austrian. Well, I don't know if you brought up Austrian anyway, but Keynesian economics, and that video is still one of the top searched or watched videos on YouTube. Now, if you don't know what Keynesian economics is, let's just say at the time of FDR, there was this economist who basically said you've got to stimulate the economy through the government mechanism. Now, this guy named Keynes also said that basically who cares, because we're all going to be dead eventually. That's the immorality of this guy that FDR and a lot of people since, the pundits and politicians, have based their philosophies on. So I think I just went on a tangent there. Capitalism, though, is so debated against socialism and other communitarianist systems that you can never find people that are honest about it in colleges. They're all anti-capitalist. They're all anti-patriarchy. They're all profit motive. Now, Adam Smith was popular in the 1760s and 70s, and he wrote The Wealth of Nations, and a lot of our founding fathers were hugely influenced by his theories on economics. In fact, he came up with the philosophy of the invisible hand, which said that every individual in an economy is motivated by an invisible hand or an invisible motive towards self-interest, and that to be efficient or to meet equilibrium in the economy, that you had to provide the wants of the consumers. Randall talked about just the other day about Adam Smith talked about making pins or needles, and just how much was involved and how many people were involved in making them, especially in a system of optimized productivity. When machines came out to make pins, he talked about just how many more you could do, hundreds a day, when before that only a person could only do one or two. So he used those types of examples and the philosophy of the invisible hand to say this is how human beings work in an economy through free trade and free exchange with one another. There, I think that's what capitalism is. Generally.
That is what capitalism is. You did.
How'd I do? I read
really good.
I read The Wealth of Nations in 2004, and I kept falling asleep in it because it's pretty dry. but he was right in a lot of respects. Free market is driven by free people making free exchanges freely with their free resources. A lot of free there. Laissez-free.
Laissez-free?
So, Randall, what do you think about that? Let's play that video, or if you got commentary.
Well, let's see. I'll just add the audio here. We'll listen to the audio because I can't get, for some reason, it's not letting me pull that up. So give me just a second. We'll pull up the audio. Anyway, this guy, he's talking with a group of college kids, who are super excited about how much atrocity there is in the world, and how they need to make sure that they go and justify or make things right globally, right? They need to go out and make sure that these people who are not making very much money make more money. Anyway, and
I will say, when we post this on YouTube, this video, this Pyrocast, I'll put the link to it because you have to see the student's faces while this professor's talking. And he's getting annoyed.
Here we go.
Class chairs. You sit here in Europe in your cushy middle class chairs. I'm serious about this. And you want to tell me that $2 a day is not a dramatic improvement in their life? It is. And there's no way for them to get to that point to be as rich as you are unless they go through that phase. And if you deny them the ability to make $2 a day by insisting that companies pay $4 and therefore they withdraw completely from the market, because you know what? I'm not paying $600 for this. I'll pay $300. And if I stop buying this, who suffers? That Chinese kid who's right now making whatever, $3 a day or whatever. Right? His alternative is to go back to the farm. And you know what they did in the farms? 40 years ago, when the Chinese were all producing agriculture, they were dying of starvation. 40 to 60 million Chinese died of starvation under Mao. Suddenly, you've given them opportunity to actually attain middle classhood, to learn a skill, to have a profession, to make money, to make themselves into something. And by the way, the Chinese never complain about how much they're being paid. You guys complain. We complain in the West. Because yes, to our middle class comfy lives, that seems ridiculous. But that's because you've never lived in real poverty. Nobody in England has lived in real poverty the way the Chinese and the Africans and the Indonesians live. Korea is an interesting case study, right? You've got North Korea and South Korea. 50, 60, 70 years ago, South Korea was as poor as North Korea. They were both dirt poor. And then South Korea instituted some economic freedom. And it made it possible for people to go and work for $1 a day, for $2 a day. And they developed skills. And they increased their productivity. And they started building more stuff. And capital came in and increased their productivity even more. And suddenly, and you go to Seoul today, and they're as rich as you are. But they, in 70 years they did, or 60 years, they did what you've done in hundreds of years. How did they do it? Because of the ability to slowly ratchet up. Now, if you demand that they skip and get to your standard of living like that, then they will stay poor forever. And that's what you're condemning them to. You're condemning them to eternal poverty. A kid who is getting $1 or $2 a day, his alternative is to die in the fields. You're doing him a favor by giving him the $2 a day. And he's producing something, and he's learning a skill at the same time. And one day he'll run the factory. But if you demand that he gets paid full, he'll never have the job, he'll never have the factory, and he'll stay poor for the rest of his life. I care about the poor, and the only system in human history, to help the poor, to help ambitious poor people rise out of poverty and become rich, has been capitalism.
My favorite line in that was that last line, the ambitious poor. You know, the only system in history that's allowed the ambitious poor to be able to raise over poverty and become rich has been capitalism.
Yeah. People don't understand. Okay, first of all, in theory, capitalism could be perfect. If everybody was honest, all the companies and the owners resisted the urge or the reality that they need to have graft and lobbyists and bribing so that they don't go out of business or just because there's human greed there. It could be perfect. I mean, literally, if you think about it, if everybody would just be good, golden rule would create a lot more gold. And
Right.
so that's the thing people don't understand about capitalism. Because there's some bad players. Look, when these CEOs do bad things sometimes, and it's probably the 20/80 rule there, honestly, maybe 10/90, then a lot more people see it. It has a huge impact on a lot of families. So yes, when evil happens in a capitalistic society, then yes, you have a huge impact. But then again, what's better? What is better? The only thing these young students and utopianists would say is socialism, collectivism, communitarianism, or basically some collectivist type of solution. And it doesn't work because of the invisible hand that I talked about. Human self-interest means me and my family are the priority.
You know, the fun thing is that all these so-called do-gooders or whatnot, they've got their own schemes or machinations where they're trying to, say, well, we need to go out and we need to do something, and that doing of something is with the force of government. We need government to go do something. We don't stop talking about what I need to do or what you need to do, and we want the government to be responsible for forcing all of us to help our neighbor, right? And so when you have people that talk about socialism or communism or whatever, what's the quote in the law? You know, he quotes a little bit from someone he's been talking about these principles with, and he's like, the problem with your system is that it doesn't go far enough. My system goes on to fraternity. And then Frederick Bastiat says, that will ruin the rest of it. And it will, because this assumption that the government has to create all this goodwill between men and women, don't want to leave those women out, that it doesn't work. It breaks down the system. And what really allows people to grow beyond that is like this speaker was talking about. It's painful to grow up and live in poverty. We in the United States have made poverty, as we see it, I mean, wealth compared with a lot of other countries in the world, we have made poverty almost painless. And so, I mean, I understand.
Well, comparatively speaking, relatively, like he told that crowd, you're rich. We don't have true poverty in this nation.
Right. Well, I mean, how many truly poor people in the United States don't have a fridge and don't have running water and don't have probably a nice car and don't have a flat screen TV and internet access? I mean, you could go all down the list, but you go to a third world country like Uganda or Kenya or something like that, and all those things that we've listed are not even on the menu for someone who's in real poverty. They're just hoping they can eat today and maybe have a place to sleep. But we've made being poor in this country so easy to deal with that there are many people who never feel the pain associated with being poor and never strive to be ambitious and grow out of it. That's why I love how he said the ambitious poor people can get out of it, because those individuals who aren't ambitious, they don't ever feel the pain. So why go anywhere else?
Well, and the other thing is the non-ambitious poor, they're often born into this. And so it's intergenerational. I mean, there are some families that I've seen and heard, 3 and 4 generations on welfare. And it's like, you have empathy for those people because you're like, you grew up with that. You don't know any differently. And so the government's created a system of perpetual welfare and destitution. The other thing, too, I've often said, Randall, about socialists is that America breeds the most sincere socialists in the world, because those who live in socialized or communist countries, they just follow it and believe in it because of fear, or that's what they've always lived in. But here you have this prosperous nation, despite all of our debt and other things we can talk about.
Seemingly prosperous.
Yeah, and where we're paid to go to school and all these things, and yet they hate the system. It's like when I hear celebrities talk about, evil capitalists in their movies or in their speeches. It's like, are you crazy? You are wealthy as can be, more than 99.9% of the world will ever be, because of a capitalistic system. Nobody makes us go to movies. Nobody makes us buy music. That is true capitalism, and yet you're out there parading around as a socialist in your Che Guevara shirt, and it's just sickening to me. And so, yeah, there's a perspective that you need to go down to Nicaragua, like I did with my family last year, and see these poor little kids in their only suit of clothing, shorts and maybe no shirt, begging and sniffing glue in their one hand because they're getting high, and then begging for money to go buy more glue, and they live on the streets. My kids saw that, and they're like, oh, it's not so bad. So there's just a perspective here that people lose when they are coddled and life's a little bit easy. We just don't understand what we have.
We don't. And
therefore we try to destroy it.
We do. And many, I think, unwittingly, they don't understand what the market really is. They just see a harm and they say, well, let's solve it. And they immediately think, the first thought is government for a lot of these people. The government's got to solve it. Well, I believe very strongly in helping other people, but I want to choose with my money or my, material, whatever. I want to choose how and who I help. And that's not because I am trying to be, what's the word? I'm not trying to be. I can't think of the word. Anyway, I'm not trying to go out and say I like one person over another person. It's because I want the responsibility of making that choice. I want the responsibility of getting to know that person. I want the responsibility of doing more than handing someone some money and saying, oh, they must be better off now. I want to know that individual is better off because I've been a part of their life. And I can't do that if I'm forced to give it as taxes or Social Security or whatever it is to the government so they can dole it out to other people. I lose out of more than money when that happens. And the country loses out because we stop working with each other. We stop thinking that it's our responsibility, and we start thinking that someone else is going to take care of it. And if you ask me what is at the root of a lot of the ills in our nation, I'd say that more than almost anything, because we don't take care of our fellow man, even as good as these whatever welfare programs may be. We don't take care of the poor. We feed them. We feed them to be poor. We pay for them to continue to be poor because we don't really care whether they get out of being poor. We just want to feel like we're helping them. Well,
and here's another thing I've noticed, because I grew up in a farming community. I've been around a lot of immigrants, okay? Illegal and legal, so-called. I've noticed that poor from other countries work really hard because they know what they have. And here's the deal. They come here and they work super hard because what they earn here has a huge impact at home. But also, companies hired illegals and immigrants, so many of them, for labor jobs. That's evidence that the poor here, which need those jobs, don't want to do them. We always hear Republicans especially, they're coming and they're taking our jobs. It's like, no, they're not. They're doing jobs that poor Americans will not take because of welfare payments and subsidies.
Right.
So get rid of the subsidies. The poor got to do something. They'll go to the churches and private organizations for help, but they'll have to take those jobs. But then they'll be better off. They'll learn a skill, like that guy said.
Yeah, well,
and they'll make tons more than what they would have made in another country. So
I want to recommend a book to our listeners.
Yeah.
It's a book, I believe it's called The Glass Palace. Anyway, this is, it's a book that I haven't read, but my wife has read it a couple times, and we've talked about it fairly extensively. Anyway, but the basic premise is it's told, this girl is telling the story living in this very destitute situation with her her parents and a couple siblings, or one or two siblings. And over the course of their her story, she's talking about growing up and how one time they were sitting there, they had nothing to eat, and her mom is sitting on the couch covering herself with a blanket, eating a big old Hershey's bar. And they have nothing to eat, but she's eating a Hershey's bar, and just kind of setting the tone for what goes on. But anyway, she eventually got herself out of that situation and went to college, and she was in a forum where they were talking about basically policy concerning handouts and taking care of the poor, and all these people were debating, well, they're poor because they haven't been given an opportunity, or they're poor because of this, or they're poor because of that, all these social harms and blah, 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 blah. And she gets up and she says, well, wait a second. You need to understand where I come from. That's my family. And my family is there not because they didn't have a fair break, not because they didn't, they were pushed down, kept down, whatever, didn't have an education, whatever. All the things you've said, they're all wrong. The reason why my family was there was because they wanted to be there.
Well, I was just looking on Amazon. It's available. It's a bestseller, and I'd never heard of it. Set in Burma during the British invasion of 1885. It's a story about this little boy named Raj Kumar. So it sounds fascinating. I don't want to read any more of the description because it kind of gives some spoilers there. But, man, it sounds like a great book, and it definitely sounds like it ties into capitalism. So, and I love stories where people in other countries...
Oh, sorry. Not the Glass Palace, the Glass Castle. The Glass Castle.
Oh, man. Well, you should read The Glass Palace, too. It's a bestseller. Well, it does sound cool because this little Raj Kumar, he
it's a
lifted on
bestseller,
the
too.
tides of political and social chaos, who goes on to create an empire in the forest. That sounds cool. So Glass Castle.
The Glass Castle has been more than 7 years on the New York Times bestseller list.
Ooh, and it's available in Audible.
There you go.
If you're not a reader, but you're a listener. Well, Randall, we got about 13 minutes. There is one topic I'm really fascinated by. Do we have time to hit another one?
Well, I just want to wrap up a little bit on this because we've talked about this. But anyway, I guess my point is, to kind of bring it all the way around, the other side of this, I mean, this is the same thing, but our society is always seeking to anesthetize anytime we have pain, right? We always, we look at things and we say, hey, I'm going to, I hurt, so I'm going to take a Valium, or I'm going to take a ibuprofen or an Advil, whatever, aspirin. We've got an innumerable number of painkillers, and that's what we always seek to do. Immediately, as soon as there's pain, we try and stop it. And the welfare programs and other do-gooder programs that we have out there are the same thing when it comes to our individual growth, right? We say, oh, I've got all these problems. I want to, I've got to deal with this, and it's a pain and it hurts. That pain leads us to positive change. It is the very root of any system of growth. I mean, you talk to any of the individuals out there talking about personal growth or high achievement or whatever, they'll always talk about the fact where you've got to go and push yourself and break barriers, and it's not an easy process. But then that goes exactly the opposite against everything that all these do-gooders try and say. We got to take people out of their painful situations. We gotta remove that so they can progress. But that's not the case. They don't progress.
Well, how many movies do you go watch where, even fiction movies, but also these biopics and true life stories where the main protagonist just he or she just, their life's terrible and then they die. There's no inspiration.
You would never watch that story.
Yeah, you wouldn't go to a movie where a friend said, that was the worst movie ever with the worst ending. I cried because it was so awful. No, you go to these movies, even comic book movies, where the hero goes through challenges and they win eventually.
Right.
And so that's what the people we admire are those who hit the pain wall and they climb it eventually, or over it or under it. And so I'm trying to think. I had a movie in mind that I recently saw. I can't remember.
We're
I saw
getting old. We can't
Guardians
remember anything today, Thomas.
Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I saw that and I hated it. You know why? Not because it wasn't fun and all the special. There's no real tension. None of the main people are going to die. There's 10 false endings. I don't like movies like that. I like movies like Slumdog Millionaire, movies like, Marky Mark's been in them, like Invincible, movies like that where it's a true life challenge, like cancer or things like that. I love those types of movies because it's just, you marvel at what people can do. The human spirit is amazing, and that's where it ties into capitalism. It's the best system for the human spirit to show itself. And people that get big on YouTube or in the public arena, they create the most value for people. And that's what I love about capitalism. It's evidence of the most value creation, or the level of value created. And it's hard. Like we saw that video with Morgan Freeman yesterday talking about...
I'm going to play it.
Whoa!
Check us out. Okay, here we go. Can you not hear that? Here we go. Okay.
Do you think that race plays a part in wealth distribution, or either a mindset that you can't or
Today?
cannot? Yeah.
No,
You don't?
no, I don't. Hey, you and I, we're proof. Why would race have anything to do with it? Put your mind to what you want to do and go for that. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. I had a long haul from where I came from to here, but here we are.
Right.
So proof is in the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and here we sit at the dining table.
But it's hard to, when you say that to some people, because they say, oh, there you go with a pull yourself up by the bootstraps thing, and, you're just being respectable. Not everybody can do that.
Everybody can.
Everybody can. I'd like to read a quote from a book that we both like. It was through the Declaration of Independence that we Americans acknowledged the eternal inequality of man, for by it we abolished a cut and dried aristocracy. We had seen little men artificially held up in high places and great men artificially held down in low places, and our justice-loving hearts abhorred this violence to human nature. Therefore, we decreed that every man should thenceforth have equal liberty to find his own level. By this very decree, we acknowledged and gave freedom to the true aristocracy, saying, let the best man win, whoever it is. Let the best man win. That's America's word. That is true democracy and true aristocracy are one and the same thing. If anyone cannot see this, so much the worse for his eyesight. In other words, we always talk about the lines in the Declaration of Independence where we say all men are and of right ought to be equal, right?
Yep.
Well, no, we're saying we realize that they are not all equal in capacity, right? We realize we're equal in opportunity, in potential. We all come out of the womb basically the same, maybe a little different color, shape, or whatever, but at that point we have equal opportunity. Even if we come into poverty, we still have the ability to choose and grow and obtain. And it's when governments hold people down artificially and freedoms are not given that they're not able to grow beyond that. They're stuck, and handouts do not glorify individuals. They help to reaffirm the fact that they are stuck, and that's where they're going to stay. And and it's not nice. I've been there where there's not been enough food on the table. I've been there. I mean, in 2009, I took home $6,000 for a family of 5 kids, so 7 people. That was my entire take-home pay. I know a little bit of what it means to not have very much.
Well, this is the other thing, Randall, on this equality thing. Okay, America had its issues. Slavery was a thing. It's still a thing. In fact, I heard there's more people in slavery today than there's ever been in modern history, which is interesting.
Right.
If that's true or not, regardless, you had a nation founded on a premise. Unequally applied, unfairly, and there was some evil. But generally, this goodness originated with the first country in the history of the world that I know of that said all men are created equal. And it was in a foundational document. Now, it's taken a long time for that to occur, and people have funny and warped ideas about equality and what true rights are. But that's beside the point. The point is, it's amazing that we have a country like we do. And the other thing I was going to say is there are only three things you can do about this world. Number one, you can say, I hate inequality, and I'm going to do something about it and be like Antifa or people that cause a lot of problems and are criminal in their actions. Number two, you can say, I hate inequality and go to the government to try to force equality, which is just communism and socialism. Or number three, you say, I hate inequality, I want to help, and I want to do something about it. And you go to your church, your friends, private organizations, and you actually help people because Christ said we will always have the poor among us. And that's why these utopians are on quite an evil platform, even when their hearts are in a good place, because they're trying to force an equality that will never exist. Capitalism is the best chance economically for an equality or the opportunity that Mr. What's his name? Just listened to?
Freeman,
Morgan Freeman. God, it's been a long day. Morgan Freeman said to the black interviewer, we're at the table. I was born in Tennessee. I had a long haul, but here we are. And that's what America represents and capitalism can do. And God bless him for speaking the truth. Someone said to me, Randall, online, they're afraid that he's going to get Bill Cosby'd because his narrative isn't going with the leftists. They said, watch Morgan Freeman get accused of something, but he's awesome. He's really awesome.
I agree. Well, but you bring that up as well because Bill Cosby was the one that was saying that not too long ago, or within the last decade before now, where he was telling all these useful African Americans, hey, figure it out. Pull your pants up, get a job. Don't go begging for support from other individuals. Make it happen. Anybody can do that, but they've got to apply themselves. But that's the rub. That's the rub. Application. See, true principles don't fix things. Application of true principles fix things, right? Yep. It's like anything. You have soap in the shower. If you don't use it, then it's not going to clean you off. It's just going to sit there and sit there. It's not going to do anything. But when you use it, it allows you to clean yourself. It's useful. All these things around us, they can be useful to an extent, but they've got to be used. They can't be just looked at and admired and say, oh, well, that's good. That's a great principle. That's a great idea. Well, people should do something about that. And I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to sit down and have some ice cream and not do anything about it. Don't do that. Do something about it. Make a difference.
And be a capitalist. Try it out. Do it for a year or two and just see where your income goes from to. Just give it a shot. Randall and I have been at this for 10 years. We know it's hard work, but some things are happening. Oh, we're going to have a new podcast coming out.
Are we?
We sure are. It's called The Tinderbox. We'll give you more information on that next week. But hey, we want to thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, go over and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Pyrolitical Live. Give us a thumbs up. Give us 2 thumbs up.
Have a good night.
Peace out.